Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. Inside an old antique shop, a small blue crystal caught the last rays of daylight, its facets glimmering with an otherworldly allure. "Don't touch that one, kid! It's trouble!" The gruff voice startled the young man browsing the shop's eclectic wares. He jerked his hand back from the crystal, sheepishly meeting the shopkeeper's stern gaze. "Sorry, I was just looking." "Well, look with your eyes, not your hands. That crystal's got a nasty reputation." Curiosity piqued, the young man couldn't help but press further. "What kind of reputation?" The shopkeeper's weathered face creased with a frown. "They say it's got power, the kind that changes a person, but power like that always comes at a price." A tingle of excitement ran down the young man's spine. Power that could change a person? It sounded too fantastical to be true. And yet, as his eyes were drawn back to the crystal's hypnotic glow, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about it. "How much?" The shopkeeper's eyebrows shot up. "Didn't you hear what I just said, boy? It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price," the young man countered, surprising himself with his own boldness. He'd never been one to argue or push boundaries, but something about the crystal called to him, awakening a desire he'd never known he possessed. For a long moment, the shopkeeper studied him, his roomy eyes narrowed in consideration. Finally, he sighed, shoulders sagging in resignation. "Your funeral, kid, but don't say I didn't warn you." As the young man left the shop, crystal tucked safely in his pocket, the shopkeeper's words echoed in his mind. He knew he should heed the warning, leave the crystal untouched, or better yet, return it to the shop. But the allure of power, of being something more than ordinary, was too strong to resist. Back in his small, cluttered apartment, he sat on the edge of his bed, rolling the crystal between his fingers. Its smooth surface was cool to the touch, belying the energy he could feel pulsing within. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to stop, to put it away and forget about it. But a lifetime of being overlooked, of blending into the background, had taken its toll. "What's the worst that could happen?" he muttered, tightening his grip on the crystal. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes and crushed the crystal in his fist. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then pain exploded through his body, white-hot and all-consuming. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips as flames erupted across his skin, engulfing him in a cocoon of fire. Through the haze of agony, he felt his body begin to change. Bones shifted and reformed, muscles stretched and contracted. His hair lengthened, cascading down his back in waves of brilliant blue. His face reshaped itself, features softening and rearranging into a new configuration. As quickly as it had begun, the fiery transformation ended. The young man, no longer a man at all, collapsed onto the bed, gasping for air. Hesitantly, she raised a trembling hand to her face, fingers tracing unfamiliar contours. What happened to me?" The voice that emerged was not her own, higher, melodic, unmistakably feminine. Panic rising in her chest, she stumbled to the bathroom, dreading what she might see in the mirror. The reflection that greeted her was a stranger. Gone was the unremarkable young man she'd been moments ago. In his place stood a strikingly beautiful woman with flowing blue hair, piercing violet eyes, and a figure that defied belief. She ran her hands over her new body, marveling at the soft curves and smooth skin. "This can't be real," she whispered, watching her reflection's lips move in perfect sync. "It has to be a dream." But no matter how many times she pinched herself or splashed cold water on her face, the reflection remained unchanged. The crystal had done exactly what the shopkeeper had warned. It had changed her, transformed her into someone entirely new. As the initial shock began to wear off, a new wave of panic set in. What if this change was permanent? How would she explain this to her friends, her family, her co-workers? Would anyone even recognize her? She sank to the bathroom floor, hugging her knees to her chest as tears began to fall. What have I done? Hours passed as she grappled with her new reality. Gradually, as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a sense of calm settled over her. Whatever had happened, whatever changes she'd undergone, she was still herself on the inside. She could figure this out. Rising unsteadily to her feet, she made her way back to the bedroom. As she passed by the window, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Curious, she peered out onto the street below. A group of masked men were approaching a nearby jewelry store, their intentions clear. Without thinking, she threw open the window, ready to shout a warning. But before she could make a sound, a burst of energy surged through her body. In a blink, she found herself on the street, standing between the would-be robbers and their target. The men skidded to a halt, staring at her in shock. "What the—" one of them began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. To her amazement, a bolt of blue energy shot from her palm, knocking the man off his feet. His companions reached for their weapons, but she was faster. With a grace and agility she'd never possessed before, she dodged their attacks, retaliating with bursts of energy that left them sprawled on the pavement. In less than a minute, it was over. The robbers lay unconscious at her feet, their weapons scattered harmlessly around them. She stood there, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. "Did you see that?" a bystander shouted, pointing their phone at her. "She took them all out like some kind of superhero." Superhero. The word echoed in her mind as she stared at her hands, still tingling with residual energy. The crystal hadn't just changed her appearance, it had given her powers beyond her wildest dreams. As sirens wailed in the distance, announcing the approach of the police, she knew she couldn't stay. With a thought, she found herself soaring into the air, leaving the growing crowd of onlookers far below. Landing on the roof of her apartment building, she sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the events of the past few hours. She was no longer the unremarkable young man she'd been yesterday. She was something else entirely. A woman with extraordinary abilities and a whole new set of challenges to face. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she made a decision. She couldn't go back to her old life, not like this. But maybe, just maybe, she could use these new powers to make a difference in the world. Rising to her feet, she took a deep breath and looked out over the city. A new day was dawning, and with it, the birth of a hero. In the weeks that followed, she struggled to adapt to her new reality. Every morning she woke hoping to find her old self in the mirror, only to be greeted by the same unfamiliar face. She spent hours practicing with her newfound abilities, learning to control the bursts of energy that sometimes escaped unbidden. Her absence from work and social circles didn't go unnoticed. Concerned messages from friends and family piled up, each one a painful reminder of the life she'd left behind. She crafted careful lies about a sudden illness, a need for time away, anything to keep them from discovering the truth. As she grappled with her internal turmoil, reports of her heroic deeds began to circulate. Grainy cell phone videos of the blue-haired woman who could fly and shoot energy from her hands spread like wildfire across social media. Some hailed her as a protector, a guardian angel watching over the city. Others viewed her with suspicion, questioning her motives and the source of her powers. One evening, as she perched on the edge of a skyscraper, scanning the streets below for any signs of trouble, a familiar voice called out behind her. "I told you the crystal was trouble, didn't I?" She whirled around, coming face to face with the old shopkeeper. He stood there, seemingly unconcerned by their precarious location, leaning on a gnarled wooden cane. "How did you—" she began, but he waved off her question. "I've been around a long time, kid. Seen a lot of strange things. You're not the first to be changed by that crystal, and I doubt you'll be the last." She felt a flicker of hope. "You mean there are others like me?" The old man nodded slowly. "Scattered throughout history. Some used their gifts wisely, others not so much." He fixed her with a piercing gaze. "The question is, what will you do with yours?" She looked down at her hands, remembering the rush of power she'd felt that first morning. "I want to help people. to make a difference. But she hesitated, voicing the fear that had plagued her since her transformation. What if I can never go back to who I was? The shopkeeper's expression softened. Change isn't always a bad thing, kid. Sometimes it's exactly what we need to become, who we're meant to be. With those cryptic words, he turned and walked away, fading into the shadows as if he'd never been there at all. Left alone with her thoughts, she pondered the old man's words. Could she truly embrace this new identity? Except that the person she'd been was gone, replaced by this powerful, blue-haired enigma? As if in answer to her internal struggle, a scream pierced the night air. Without hesitation, she leapt from the building, her body responding instinctively to the call for help. She arrived at the scene to find a woman cornered in a dark alley, 3 menacing figures advancing on her. Landing between the would-be attackers and their prey, she felt a surge of righteous anger. "Step away from her!" she commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. The men hesitated, clearly thrown by her sudden appearance. Then, emboldened by their numbers, they charged. She met them head-on, her movements fluid and precise. A roundhouse kick sent one sprawling, while a burst of energy knocked another off his feet. The third managed to land a glancing blow, but she barely felt it, her enhanced physiology shrugging off the impact. In moments, it was over. The attackers lay groaning on the ground, thoroughly outmatched. She turned to the woman they'd been threatening, extending a hand to help her up. "Are you all right?" The woman nodded, eyes wide with awe. You're her! The blue-haired hero everyone's been talking about." She felt a flush of embarrassment at the title. "I'm just trying to help where I can." "Well, thank you," the woman said earnestly. "What should I call you?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't given much thought to a name, too preoccupied with the monumental changes in her life. But as she stood there, the enormity of what she'd become finally sinking in, a name came to her. "Sapphire," she said, the word feeling right on her tongue. "You can call me Sapphire." As sirens approached, signaling the arrival of the police, Sapphire prepared to take flight. But before she left, she turned back to the woman. "Stay safe out there," she said with a smile. Then, with a leap that defied gravity, she soared into the night sky. From that moment on, Sapphire fully embraced her new identity. The city became her domain, its streets and alleys her patrol route. She intervened in robberies, stopped assaults, even rescued people from burning buildings. With each heroic act, she felt more comfortable in her new skin, more at peace with the changes she'd undergone. But as her reputation grew, so did the challenges she faced. Not everyone welcomed a superpowered vigilante in their midst. The police were divided on how to handle her, some grateful for the help, others viewing her as a loose cannon operating outside the law. One detective in particular, a no-nonsense woman named Rodriguez, seemed determined to uncover Sapphire's true identity. More than once, Sapphire had to use her powers to evade the detective's pursuit, always staying one step ahead. As weeks turned to months, Sapphire's abilities continued to evolve. She discovered she could manipulate energy in ways she'd never imagined, creating force fields, healing minor injuries, even influencing the emotions of those around her to a limited degree. With these new powers came new responsibilities. She found herself drawn into conflicts beyond simple street crime, facing off against other enhanced individuals who used their abilities for selfish or destructive purposes. One such encounter left her battered and bruised, having narrowly defeated a man who could control metal. As she limped back to her hidden sanctuary, she couldn't help but wonder if she was in over her head. Collapsing onto her bed, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. The face that had once seemed so alien to her now felt like home. She realized with a start that she couldn't remember what she'd looked like before the transformation. The young man she'd been was fading from her memory, replaced by the hero she'd become. A notification on her phone drew her attention. It was a news alert about a hostage situation at the city's main bank. Despite her exhaustion, she knew she couldn't ignore it. "No rest for the weary," she muttered, pushing herself to her feet. As she soared towards the bank, her mind raced with possibilities. Who was behind this? What would she find when she arrived? And most importantly, could she handle it? The doubt that had plagued her in the early days of her transformation resurfaced. Was she really cut out for this hero business? Or was she just playing a part, pretending to be something she wasn't? But as she landed in front of the bank, greeted by the relieved cheers of the gathered crowd, she felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This was who she was now. Not the unremarkable young man she'd once been, but Sapphire protector, hero, guardian of the city. Taking a deep breath, she strode towards the bank's entrance, hands glowing with barely contained energy. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head on. Because that's what heroes do. The hostage situation at the bank proved to be Sapphire's most challenging test yet. As she entered the building, she was met with a scene of chaos. Terrified civilians huddled on the floor, watched over by masked gunmen. At the center of it all stood a figure that made Sapphire's blood run cold. Another enhanced individual, his body crackling with electrical energy. "Well, well," he sneered, turning to face her. "If it isn't the city's little blue savior, come to play hero again?" Sapphire raised her hands, energy pulsing at her fingertips. "Let these people go. Your quarrel is with me." The man laughed, a harsh sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Oh, but you're wrong. My quarrel is with this entire city. And you're just a bug I need to squash." Without warning, he unleashed a bolt of lightning that sent Sapphire flying backward, crashing through the bank's glass doors. She hit the pavement hard, her body screaming in protest. As she struggled to her feet, she could hear screams from inside the bank. "Come on, hero," the man's voice taunted. "Show me what you've got." Gritting her teeth against the pain, Sapphire launched herself back into the fray. The next few minutes were a blur of energy blasts, acrobatic dodges, and desperate attempts to shield the hostages from stray bolts of electricity. She could feel her powers straining to their limits, but she refused to give up. In a moment of desperation, she reached deep within herself, tapping into a well of power she didn't know she possessed. With a primal scream, she released a wave of energy that engulfed the entire room. The electrical villain was thrown back, his powers momentarily disrupted. Seizing the opportunity, Sapphire closed the distance between them. Her fist connected with his jaw, enhanced strength behind the blow. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. As the dust settled, Sapphire became aware of the eerie silence that had fallen over the bank. Slowly, she turned to face the hostages, fearing what she might see. Had her desperate gambit hurt them? To her relief, they were all unharmed, protected by a shimmering blue force field she'd unconsciously created. As the field dissipated, a tentative cheer went up from the crowd. Soon, the whole room was filled with applause and cries of gratitude. Exhausted but triumphant, Sapphire helped the hostages to their feet and ensured the villain was secured for the authorities. As she prepared to leave, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Detective Rodriguez. "Nice work in there," the detective said, her usual stern expression softened by a hint of admiration. "Maybe you're not the menace I thought you were." Sapphire managed a tired smile. "Just doing my job, Detective. Same as you." As she flew away from the scene, Sapphire felt a sense of peace settle over her. The doubts that had plagued her earlier seemed to melt away in the face of what she'd accomplished. She may not have chosen this path, but she was walking it with purpose and determination. Months passed, and Sapphire's reputation continued to grow. She became a symbol of hope for the city, a guardian angel who watched over its citizens. But with her rising fame came new challenges. One evening, as she patrolled the city skyline, she spotted a familiar figure on a rooftop, the old shopkeeper. Landing beside him, she couldn't help but smile. "Let me guess, you're here to cryptically warn me about some new danger?" The old man chuckled. "Not this time, kid. I'm here to give you a choice." He held out his hand, revealing another crystal, identical to the one that had transformed her all those months ago. "This crystal has the power to reverse what was done," he explained. to return you to who you were before. Sapphire's breath caught in her throat. The possibility of reclaiming her old life, the one she'd mourned and missed, was suddenly within reach. But as she reached for the crystal, she hesitated. She thought of all she'd accomplished as Sapphire, the lives she'd saved, the difference she'd made. She remembered the unremarkable young man she'd been, always blending into the background, never making an impact. With a sad smile, she gently closed the shopkeeper's fingers over the crystal. "Thank you," she said softly. "But I don't need it. This is who I am now." The old man nodded, a knowing glint in his eye.
"I had a feeling you'd say that. You've grown, kid. Become who you were always meant to be."
As he turned to leave, Sapphire called out,
"Will I see you again?"
He glanced back with a mysterious smile.
"Oh, I imagine our paths will cross again someday. Until then, keep flying high, Sapphire."
With that, he vanished into the shadows, leaving Sapphire alone with her thoughts. As she looked out over the city, her city, she felt a surge of pride and purpose. The transformation that had once seemed like a curse had become the greatest gift she'd ever received. It had given her the power to make a real difference in the world. A distant siren caught her attention, pulling her from her reverie. Somewhere out there, someone needed help. Without hesitation, she leapt from the rooftop, soaring towards the sound. Sapphire, the blue-haired hero, guardian of the city, was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, for she had finally embraced her true self. Not the person she had been, but the hero she had become. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.